Okay, I've got 20 slides in 10 minutes, so I shall go a little bit fast. And the goal of this talk is to spread some good news, to spread understanding of what Pro Audio is and how people make music on Linux, maybe inspire you to make some music. And when you think Pro Audio, you think of this guy in a big recording studio with lots of equipment, but in fact, all kinds of people could be classed as Pro Audio. I think anyone who is making content and is not simply consuming content, then I would class them as a Pro Audio user. We know that most musicians don't make any money, so I wouldn't base it on who's earning money from their work. It's more about who's pushing things to the limit and creating content. So if you want to produce music, generally on a computer, you would use one piece of software called a digital audio workstation. That's like your IDE, to use a programming analogy. And then you would use some kind of instruments or audio effects, which are usually distributed separately as plugins and developed by different people. And then you need a way to get the sound out of the computer. So I'll talk about those three things. This is Ardour, which is probably a well-known open source digital audio workstation. I don't have time to explain what all these things do, but there's some audio I've recorded, and there's a mixer to mix the sound. Ardour is very, very good. And it's like I say, under the GPL, but the maintainers encourage you to buy a pre-built version from their website. Obviously, you have the option to download it or get it from a distro package in which they don't get any money. Of course, you can also subscribe, and they have enough subscribers to pay at least one full-time developer, which is excellent. The other big door available on Linux is Bitwig. This is proprietary software. It's also very, very good. And again, I'm not going to explain how it works, but you record some audio, you can apply effects to it, you can do a million other things, and it is available on FlatHub. So that's excellent. This is a proprietary independent company using FlatHub. Like, they publish the Flatpak. The software is the demo version if you download it from FlatHub, and then you pay them for a license, and it unlocks all of the more interesting features. And so it's not cheap. It's 400 euros, but I would say it's worth it. It's very good software. So a digital audio workstation is a big, complicated program which does everything you need. There's also some famous ones like Ableton Live and Cubase. Logic, we don't like those because they don't work on Linux and they don't care about us. Reaper also works on Linux. It's not available in FlatHub yet, hopefully soon. And there's also I don't have time to talk about all the cool software. Ossia, the Ossia developer is here. It's very good. Pure Data, VCV Rack, Bespoke Synth, all very interesting bits of software, all free software and available on Linux, which you can make beautiful music with. So you also want some instruments, right? This is an example of some audio plugins. You can use these to generate sounds or process sounds. They look very complicated to use, and they are. You kind of have to learn, or at least mess around and get things that sound interesting. But from a software perspective, they're very simple. MIDI or audio goes in, audio goes out, and there's a UI. There's no there's no printing, there's no hardware access apart from audio, so they're quite simple to package. Here's Ardour running some effects plugins. Almost all digital audio workstations will host plugins, and I've gone on this in the wrong order. Here are the names of some plugins, and so they're usually distributed as a binary file that you download, and you unpack into a folder, and then the software picks it up. And there are a few formats, but the most famous is called VST. It's not a completely open format, so it's not the ideal format, but it is widely used, and it provides a free C SDK, so almost everyone uses it. They provide their plugin as a SO file, basically, that you download. So there are tens of thousands of these. I looked at a popular website that has a database of all the audio plugins they know about. I found 10,000 are listed. Of those, 500 or so are marked as being available on Linux. This is an underestimate. I checked a few things I use, and they weren't marked as being available on Linux, so it's definitely slightly more. But it's not enough, right? It's not nearly enough. So what can we do? Distribution, like I said, you distribute them now by downloading the file as a VST. There is an effort to make them available on FlatHub. A guy called Hubert Figuière has been doing all of that effectively. So he's defined a namespace org.freedesktop.linuxaudio.plugins, and he's packaged a few, 38 open source instruments and effects. There's a few limitations to this approach, such as the plugin has to use the same runtime as the host. Look, they all use FreeDesktop SDK at present, but if that does mean a plugin host can't decide to use the KDE SDK, for example, because all the plugins would then not, somehow probably not work. Also, FlatHub doesn't yet have any way in the website to display them, so you can get them through the Flatpak CLI, but you can't search for them on the FlatHub website. So I suspect most people aren't using this. I don't have any numbers, but I think most people who use VSTs on Linux are still going to the manufacturer website and downloading them. A quick, how much time do I have left? 5 minutes. OK, so this won't be such a quick rundown. Some thoughts on bringing more audio plugin developers over to Linux. I think most plugin users who are making music, they care about how much does it cost, does it sound good, and is it going to wreck my CPU? The people making the plugins care about, am I going to get paid? Not all of them care about this, but there's a lot of small businesses who are making audio plugins. They care about, is it going to keep working? So do I have to recompile it every time there's a new Ubuntu release? If so, maybe I release 30 products and I have to recompile all of them every 6 months. That doesn't scale. So they want to release something that's going to work forever. And they generally don't want to make it open source because the code is the secret source in the case of audio plugins. There are some exceptions, but there's very little take-up, I'd say, of releasing the code of these in the open because, in general, that's the secret thing that they're selling. So that would, in general, hurt the business model of the people making them. This is my interpretation of the event, of the situation. But I think, in general, musicians aren't bothered about modifying the code of what's going on in their plugins. They think, oh, or it sounds good, or I use it, or I find a different one. And as I mentioned before, they're not too hard to package, so you can cut them off from your home directory if you want or anything. If you don't trust them, you don't necessarily need to do a security audit. And that's my thoughts on this topic. Bringing more plugins to Linux, I think we need to focus on the distribution story and giving a sort of way to link that doesn't break every few months, which we're doing. So the last part of the picture is getting audio out of the computer. I assumed I'd be running out of time by this point, so I summed it up as Pipewire is amazing, which it is. And to go into a bit more detail, Jack has always been the way to do low latency audio in Linux, and it's great, but it doesn't coexist with Pulse Audio, so that kind of sucks that you have to turn off one to use the other. Pipewire somehow impressively manages to do both, and it doesn't break API in a way that's going to cause regressions when the base OS or the Flatpak version updates. And most pro audio apps can continue to use Jack via the libpipewire jack shim. And it gives you all this flexibility. Now I can route my toaster to my audio output and add an audio effect into the pipeline and drag this to here. It's very, very flexible. So that's all I had to say. Firstly, things are great. When I first started using desktop Linux many years ago, you couldn't do pro audio at all. The software simply didn't exist. Windows and Mac were the only option. And in 2022, lots of great software exists. It's here. People are publishing professional quality software on Flatpak and running a business, making money off it, and pro audio users can use Linux. A couple of closing thoughts, idle thoughts really, on the FlatHub UI. Firstly, maybe we can separate a little bit more audio-video into, I don't know exactly how to word it, but separate the music players out from the music creation software, because they kind of do unrelated things, and they're currently all mixed in together. And also think about whether audio plugins are interesting to include in the Flatpak web UI, and how we can do that. There might be an opportunity. That's all I have to say. Thanks for listening. I don't know if we have time.